Awesome. Welcome everyone this event. And what you're seeing on your screen right now are your responses for the question, what do you think about the UX job market today? What I find interesting about this is there are two kinds of answers. There's one type of answer which says it's a very overcrowded market, it's very competitive. On the other side, I see people talking about, hey, it's going to be demanding. There's a lot of opportunity to learn. There's a lot of different professionals from different disciplines coming in. So there's a lot of diversity and a lots of opportunity in this space. Okay. So before we start, I want to ask you one more question. Okay. And that question is, how much do you know about UX? So I'm going to just launch a poll and I'm going to have you answer that question while we wait. How confident are you about your knowledge of UX? Okay. And there's a poll that's going to launch out. And if you could just very quickly answer that, then we get started with today's event.
Ten more seconds.
Awesome. What I want you to look at is the scores here. So there's at least about 80% of the folks. So it's about what, 16, 17% of the folks believe there are three, they scored themselves more than three. So they believe they know enough to be good, right? But a majority of us feel that we are below that, right? So that is something that you want to think about as we go through our presentation, okay? Now, what I want to do today, before we start, let's go on to the next slide. And then I want to give a quick introduction about myself before we start this event, okay? I've had about 25 years of experience building and training people around the world. I've co-founded an Inc. 5000 company. I've got a bunch of patents and stuff like that. Probably all of you use features that I've designed. So anytime you search and you see those search suggestions come down below, that's a feature that I've designed. Okay. So, and I've worked with pretty much most of the big companies, the brand names, as well as the hottest startups out there in the market. I've worked with all of them, and I've worked with them at multiple levels, including helping them do their designs, all the way to thinking about helping them build their teams. Okay, which includes what are the system process, how should you hire, where should you hire from? These are all the questions I've helped companies all around the world do. Okay. And what I really want to do today is I want to talk about, or at least in the next 3 days, I want to talk to you about how to build a career. Right? Building a career is different from a job. A job is you get a job. Okay. A career is a long-term process. It happens over the next 10, 15, 20 years. Okay. How do you build a career where you're a leader within your own organization, or no matter where you go, you get invited to join the company? That's the way you want to think about it. So the way it's broken down is it's going to be talked in 3 stages. Today, we are specifically going to talk about how do you plan for a career in UX. And I bet even for the people that are experienced, okay, this is important because we're not just going to talk about what are the topics you need to learn. We are also going to talk about what's going to change with AI in the market. Okay, we're going to talk about how your demand and your approach to this discipline needs to be as you learn. Okay. Tomorrow, we will talk about how you will learn and upskill yourself. And again, this is not just for people who are, just looking for a job in UX, but people who are working as UX designers as well. And interestingly enough, a lot of the folks that I mentor and teach are people that are already been working. So on average, they have about 2 to 3 years of experience working as designers before they come to me. Okay. So this is for both people who are working in the industry as well as people who are looking for opportunities. And the last day is an invite only event where we're going to talk about how do you prepare for a growthful career. Okay. And again, the reason I'm keeping that invite is because I want to have people who are really serious, who are motivated, who want to sit in the room and and I want to have a more interpersonal, small group kind of a vibe where we are talking and I'm answering everybody's questions. So that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to keep that group small and limited so that we can have a conversation. Okay. Now let's go on to the next slide. Okay. For those of you, the invite comes if during for day 3, we will talk about how do you do your portfolio, how do you communicate yourself within your organizations, how do you do interview tasks. These are the kinds of topics that we will talk about here. And I'm sure there's a lot of questions and answers around that space into how do you break into UX. Okay. Now, there's also a participation certificate. If you complete day 1 and day 2 assignments on time, you do get a participation certificate and you have to attend day 3 as well. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Rules and guidelines, keep your cameras on. And I completely understand if somebody can't keep their cameras on. My only motivation is if you can't keep your cameras on, just go to the YouTube channel. That's easier because keeping the camera on indicates a certain level of commitment from your side. Okay. And when I'm explaining something, I like to see all of your faces so I know if maybe I'm saying something that you don't understand or whatever, I can stop and I can ask questions. So this is helpful for me as well. Okay. This is a safe environment, no bad language, no, demeaning language, nothing, no question is bad, no question is stupid. Every question, if you have a question, chances are there's probably 10 other people that have the exact same question, but they're afraid to ask it. Okay. So if you have a question, ask it. The worst case, I might tell you, well, I cannot answer this right now. I'll answer this later. Okay. But I will make sure that when you step away from here, you walk away with no questions. Okay. The next one, be kind and courteous to everyone. Everybody is trying to do the same thing for their lives. Be nice to everyone and respect each other's privacy. That said, are we ready to start? Just say yes, type in yes in your chat, and then we can get going. Awesome. Let's go on to the next slide. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, what does a UX designer do? Now, for a lot of you, this might seem like an easy question, but bear with me because I'm going to ask you this question so to encourage you to think about what is required in the market. Okay. So what does a UX designer do? So for this, I have a question and a poll. Okay. Let's go to the next slide and let's look at the screen. Okay, here are 2 screens for a railway booking page. Okay, one screen, and both of these are, by the way, people that have, as in my company, when I try to recruit people, I tell them like design the booking page or a search result page of a railways page. And then when people give their tasks, I can usually tell which one is a UX designer, which one is not. Okay, can you do the same thing? Okay, there's going to be a poll. Fill in the poll, and there's going to be opinions as well. That's fine. So which of these 2 guys do you think is a UX designer? And what is interesting is when I hire junior level people, I make them do this task. But then when I'm hiring senior level folks, I give them this screen and I give them a series of screens and I ask them which one of them is a UX designer. Because both of them require the same skills. If a senior level person is there, they know UX, they can tell which of these guys is a UX guy. All right, let's look at this. So almost about 54%. So I would say it's about 50-50 between A and B. Okay. Now, as an experienced person, if I was asked this question and this was for my job, this is how I would evaluate it. Okay. Remember, we talk about user experience. So the center of the game is the user. What would a user want to do on this page? Okay. Feel free to type it in if you have ideas, but otherwise, I will keep running through. What would a user want to do on this page? The first thing the person probably wants to do is they want to discover the trains. Okay. Well, which are the trains that are running between these two locations? The second thing is they want to compare. Well, they might compare on availability, they might compare on duration, they might compare on cost. So there are a couple of different aspects to it. And then they might say, okay, I like this one train, I want to buy it. So now they're checking, okay, does it have availability for the class that I'm looking at? And usually this is the sequence. They don't look at all four problems at the same time. They first try to discover, then they try to compare, and then they look for the availability. And finally, when all of this is done, this is when they will purchase. Okay. Now, it had, okay. So now, when you look at these goals, now let us look at both of these screens and see which of these goals work on both these screens. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So if I wanted to see availability, okay, as a designer, one of the most common concepts that we have is something called the fold. So if you look at that screen, there's a dotted line there. Okay, that is the fold. What it means is 100% of the people will see above the fold. But every time you have to go below the fold, about 50% of your users will drop off. Okay. So between A and B, which one is more likely to help you discover? The answer is A. Because when you look at B, only two of those trains are visible above the fold. Whereas when you look at A, there are at least about 6 or 5 trains that are available. Okay. Another thing, once you're getting into a search result page, do you need to modify your search terms? Do you need to modify your... Not really. You're trying to discover. Modification is a secondary action. Maybe you didn't like the train, maybe there was no availability, then you want to change the date. That's when you'll go back to do it. So why is more than 70% of that space given just for that space to enter and change your query? Right? And again, clearly you can see that A helps solve the discovery problem. B does not do such a good job. Okay. And by the way, again, for those of you that are not turning on your cameras, Rajiv will put you in the waiting room and then you can go to the YouTube channel and watch it from there. Okay. But if you want to be in this space, let's actually keep our cameras on so I can see all of you. Okay. Now, let's go on to the second goal that your user has. They want to compare. Okay. What are you comparing? If you want to compare the duration, how long does that train go? It is very easy when you look at A. In the center, you have the duration all lined up one on top of each other. You just have to keep your eyes steady and then scroll down. You can literally see all the durations. Okay. Whereas when you look at screen B, again, interesting. Both screens have the same information. They're just presented differently. Okay. When you look at screen B, the comparison is just a little bit harder. Okay. Now, when you want to think about, which classes are available, it's fairly easy to kind of look through that. You see all the 3 classes right there. Right. Now, what is also interesting when you think about comparing, if you look at train B, there's so many things that are highlighted. It's almost like book now. Every button for book now is colored, right? All the classes, there's a color in there, right? When you look at so many colors, which one should you focus on? It's almost like you go to a shop and 10 vendors are shouting at you, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. That's exactly each of these trains is shouting, buy me, buy me, buy me. Well, I don't want to buy you right now. I want to compare right now. Isn't it? There's a fundamental difference. Even though B looks more visually appealing, It is not solving the problem. It is like a fish market. Everybody is trying to get your attention. Whereas A is designed to be muted, and the order is set up in such a way that you can systematically compare and look at all the content there. Right? So that is what it is. So when you look at comparison, again, A wins the game, B not as much. Now let's look at the third goal. If you want to check for availability, how would you know what the availability is? Now look at designer A and designer B. Look at the subtle changes that they've done. Designer A has color coded it and shape coded it. Okay. Color coding is it looks different. Visually, even without reading, you can just look at that color and say something is available. Okay. Shape coding is it has a different shape. So even if you don't read it, it has a different shape. And again, designer A understands the concept that people don't read. Reading is harder work when compared to just looking at pictures. So this person is looking at shapes and colors to communicate rather than forcing the person to read. Right? Again, subtle changes, but there is an understanding, a deeper understanding of what the customer wants. And finally, when you look at the last one, if you want to purchase, right? Once you've decided you want to purchase, you're just going to purchase it. You don't need all the buttons to be loud in there. So when you think about this again, let's go back to the big picture. Which one of these guys is a UX designer and which one is pretending to be a UX designer? Right? And this is exactly what, if somebody experienced was coming in, this was the argument I would expect from that person. So I know, yes, this person understands UX. Simple task. Everybody on the same page with me here? Do you guys know what a UX designer does? Just type in yes, and then we can go on to the next topic. Awesome. So let me see if there's any other questions or whatever. So Rajiv, if anybody types in any questions, let me know. Okay? Okay. So now let's go on to the next concept. What are the opportunities in UX design? Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is interesting. How many of you have heard of the company McKinsey? McKinsey, just raise your hand so I can see. Yeah. McKinsey is this huge business consulting company. Okay. And one of the things that they've realized pretty much, they say, no matter where we consult with, design is going to be a critical part of our consulting operation. Okay. And the reason they say that is in terms of revenue, companies that incorporate design as part of their revenue have at least 3 times the revenue of companies that don't. Okay. The same way, when you look at returns to shareholders, which is dividends or stock market price, you're talking at least double the stock market price for companies that focus on design versus that don't. Okay. This is a very substantial piece of revenue. Okay. In fact, if you look at any of the top business schools, Harvard or Stanford or University of Michigan or wherever, all the top design schools, whether Europe, US, I'm familiar with the US space. I'm not as with the the European, but I do know that all top business schools have a design school attached to them. And guess what? All the design students are allowed to take business classes, and all the business students are allowed to take design classes. And the requirement for an MBA is to say you need to have at least 25% of your credits in the design school. And for the design guys, it's not mandatory, but you are encouraged to take classes in the business school. Okay. Now, think about this. Think about this. Okay. These are the top schools, and they're basically telling you that unless you don't have experience or knowledge of design, you cannot be a successful business person. That's what they're telling all of these top business guys. Right? And the same thing is what they're telling the designers. If you do not understand how the business works, you cannot be a successful designer. Right? So in a way, design and business are very, very tightly aligned, and both of these are extremely strategic disciplines, right? And I mean that from, it's if you're doing coding, you are developing a product. But strategic is the decisions you make today are either going to make or break the company 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now. Okay. That is how impactful design is as a discipline. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is the company perspective. Okay. Even today, when jobs seem to be really hard to get, okay, there is a huge shortage of talent globally. Okay? Now, interestingly, what has happened, and I can tell you a little bit because I have offices in Colombia, in US and India. I can tell you this because what happened with the pandemic is a lot of people said, I'm going to work remotely. And when American employees said, I'm going to work remotely, they're working from Hawaii or they went to Mexico to work from or wherever, companies started realizing, why don't I just hire Mexican guys? Why don't I just hire people in Colombia? Okay. Why don't I hire people in India? So the salaries went up significantly for all the people that are working remotely. Right? Because they said talent is talent. Whether I find it in the US or India or wherever, how does it matter? Okay. But then when the salaries increased, the competition for talent also increased. Right? Now, actually, the competition increased and therefore the salaries increased. I think there's a causality there. So it's a different way. The competition increased, the salaries increased. The second thing that also happened was companies, if you've done job interviews today, you'll realize the kinds of questions that you're getting from companies are really smart. These are not the kinds of questions you would get 2 years ago. Right? They were very, very savvy questions. Right? And then you start realizing, companies are realizing, if I'm going to pay more money, I want to get the talent. And so companies are refusing to compromise. If the world is my thing, I either hire in Bangalore or Bogota or, Ohio. And interestingly, the salaries that I pay in Colombia are like, I think about 60 or 70% the same as what somebody would get in Ohio. So imagine that. The US salaries are very similar to what you find in Colombia, where the cost of living is about like 20% of the US. Right? So this is something that has changed. So the demand for talent has continued to increase, and the global shortage of talent, qualified talent, has also increased. Right? And I routinely get calls from companies that say, "Listen, I'm looking for qualified people." And this I'm just talking to this one company that said, I am laying off, not laying off, but literally in the process of offboarding my whole design team. And I want to build my design team from the ground up all over again because the people I have are not able to do the job. Right? And this is a common phenomena that I'm seeing across companies. Right? Let's go to the next slide. Right? Now, here's another data point. Okay? 1 out of 3 people, you probably already know this, and for people that are working, you can look around you. You can say 1 out of 3 people's jobs has already been taken over by AI in the last 1 year since AI came out. Right? It's about 1 year, 3 months. Right? And your jobs are going to be more and more automated. So what does that mean? Is there no more need for designers? Because if AI is going to come and take your jobs, well, you might as well just go home and wait for Manrega, right? MNREGA, like if you work for 180 days and chill out. That's a game we need to think about. Well, actually, no, right? Here's the other data point I want you to see, right? Salaries are still increasing, right? What's the difference? What is the point? If people are losing jobs on one side, traditionally we are used to this space where people lose jobs and salaries go down. Right? Companies are willing to pay more money. They want quality. They want people who know what they're doing. You understand? So the simplest example I can say is when the Olympics was first run in Greece. Okay, anybody in the neighborhood could come and race, and that was the Olympics. Right? Today, if you want to race in an Olympic, you have to go through years of practice. You have to prove yourself as the best in your neighborhood, in your state, in your country, and then you represent your country, and then you basically go through. It's a much more structured and a systemic place. It's a more technical game. 0.1 second makes a difference between winning or losing. Right? So when you think about that, design is exactly that. It's become a technical topic. It is not a art form. Okay. When I got into design, what was interesting was I came from the cognitive science background. Okay. And when I went into the Bay Area at that time, companies like Yahoo and all these guys, they were hiring people who were songwriters. Oh, you can do good drawings, come in. Or good colors, come in. That's what they were hiring. But at some point they realized, well, we are not making our profits. We're losing money. And that's when they said, let's bring in cognitive science people. Let's bring in data science people. Let's bring in, interaction design people. That's when all these specializations started coming in. Because they started. And interestingly enough, that same thing is happening in India. What happened in the US about years ago, 4 years ago, if you look at jobs, the title interaction design was pretty much non-existent. But today, if you look at jobs, everybody says, I want an interaction designer. Okay. That is what it means. The discipline is becoming more technical. All right. So let's see. Let's go to the next one. Okay. So now here's another interesting statement that we see from companies. Okay. The statement that they say is, well, where are the jobs coming and what are the companies looking for? Okay. And interestingly enough, do you see knowledge of UX anywhere on this sheet? Not really, right? That is a given. You need to know your stuff. But companies are realizing you're going to learn new stuff. New tools are coming out every 2 months, 3 months, right? So what they're saying is, what is more important is your ability to collaborate in teams. That is critical. There is no compromise for companies on that, right? The second most important thing, accountability and reliability. They're saying if somebody says, I'm going to get this done, it needs to be done, right? If somebody says, I'm going to come in today, you're coming in today. I'm coming in at 10 o'clock, you're coming in at 10 o'clock. Accountability and reliability. Nobody wants to micromanage anybody else. That game is done, right? Companies want you to be accountable, reliable, disciplined. The third point is, what is the technical requirement? They say, I want your reasoning and problem solving skills. Because if you have an AI that's doing something, how do you tell whether the AI is wrong or correct? You need to have the reasoning and problem solving skills to tell whether it's working or not, right? So they're looking for people who can manage an AI. Okay. So that is the third part. And again, in priority, that is what is interesting. The first two are more your soft skills. The third one is when they're saying you can manage an AI and get the work done. Okay. And then you then come to active learning and curiosity, because technology is changing. Everything is changing every 18 months, 6 months, 2 months. That is where you want to think about active learning. And finally, it is resilience and adaptability. Now, resilience and adaptability is interesting. Okay. This is also what child psychologists are kind of pushing today. Resilience is your ability to fall down 10 times, because when you're doing design, you will fail 9 out of 10 times. You will fail, guaranteed, right? And then the 10th time you will get it correct. So you need to learn to fall down and not take it personally. You need to learn to be wrong, which ironically in our Indian education system, that's the exact opposite. God forbid you fail in any class, guess what happens? Somebody tells you that you are somehow mentally retarded, there's some problem, whatever, all these other issues, right? And I tell you, this is one of the things, learning to fail to be a good designer is probably the best skill that you could have. Okay. And here's an interesting thing. Guess what makes me a good designer today? I failed my 12th standard. Right? When I failed my 12th standard, I went through a year of everybody telling me you are no good. Right? And guess what? Once they said that, I had nothing to prove to anybody. Everybody knows I'm stupid. I don't have to prove anything to them. I can be wrong, and that's okay. Right? Ironically, I have a degree from Harvard. I have all that. After that, doesn't matter. I am free from people's expectations. You get it? And that's what resilience and adaptability is about. It is about being resilient and being okay with failure. That way you become okay with experimenting and trying new things. Everybody okay with this slide? You understand this? This is what you need to do to succeed. And again, my advice is not about getting a job. My advice is about saying, how do I build a career where you are the best in whatever you choose, whether it's design or anything, whatever you choose, you want to be the best. Okay, now let's go on to the next slide. So let's talk about what is UX today. Okay, and again, for a lot of you, you might be thinking, well, why is he talking about all of this? My point is, the reason I'm talking about all of this is you want to understand what is driving the market today. Okay, if you don't understand what is driving the market, then how do you be successful in that space? Right? So I could very easily tell you, learn topic A, topic B, topic C, topic D, but if the market changes, then you're dependent on me. You come back to me again. Right? No, that's not the point. Understand how the market is, and then you're going to be always successful no matter what. Okay? Now, let's go on to the next slide. If you want to understand what UX is today, you want to think about way back in the early 90s, 91, 92. This was the website. Okay? There was no CSS, there was nothing. You would just basically put a bunch of links. And then that's what it was. That was the internet. Okay. Their intention at that time was you go to the website and then you see this link, there's information, you click on there, you read the information, you pick up the phone and do your business. There was no such thing as even a form field or whatever. It was just a button. That was the simplest thing. And maybe a search box. That's it. There was not a lot of complexity in there. Okay. Just 8 years later, okay, this is where the difference happened. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. And so, if you think about it, that's where this is an example of Amazon, but eBay, Amazon, all of these companies basically came out, right? So, where you're talking about the first page was thousands of visits a month, the second page you're talking about 2.5 billion visits a month. Okay, think about the engineering that has to work to make this happen. Okay, think about the designer who has to think about it. So imagine if you create a graphic that is just 1 pixel more, okay, and that has to be given to 2.5 billion people. You're talking like $100,000 more in cost for the company, because that is what your server has to work harder just to deliver that 1 pixel. Okay, so that is where it has become a finely tuned engine. It's a jet engine. Okay, these experiences are interactive. They're responsive. No matter what device you open it in, they're responsive. They're scalable. So if you have like 50 users, 100 users, 1,000 users, doesn't matter. If you have multiple screens, it doesn't matter. Different sizes, doesn't matter. Whether you're accessing on a phone or a desktop, doesn't matter. They're based on multiple services. This is interesting, right? Multiple services means if you are Amazon, you're getting data from the US Postal Service, because if you ship something, you have to get live data from the US Postal Service. You're getting data from multiple warehouses, either controlled by Amazon or not, right? There's machine learning built into it, and everything is metrics driven. Okay, how much of an improvement every year at the end of the year or every quarter when you do a launch of a product, people will ask you, well, what was the impact of this design? If you cannot explain it, you can't keep your job. Right? There has to be a strategy. Even if you have to do a project, you have to explain, well, I'm going to do this because it's going to change this metric by this much, and therefore it is good for the business in this way. Right? That is what a designer does in these kinds of companies. Okay. Any questions or thoughts at this point, guys? All right, go ahead, Achyut. You have a question? Yeah, Achyut needs to be allowed to speak.
So, so it's very interesting when you said that when you design something, what metric is it impacting in terms of business? Sir, why is it that usually this is not the language that we hear at other design these things? Because I mean, even they're also designing only knowing that they want to drive revenue, but why is it that when it is being taught that we are not made to think in numbers?
Well, I think there's a couple of different reasons. Okay. Now, the first aspect is most founders in India
Mm-hmm.
don't really understand how design can be used. Okay. In fact, most colleges don't understand. Even if you look at the top design schools in India,
Right.
okay, they will teach you ergonomics, they will teach you all of that, but they will never teach you metrics.
Okay.
So when you get somebody graduating out of that system, how do you think they can deliver something? Even if I, as a founder, am expecting my designer to drive the metrics, to drive the meetings and stuff like that. But my designer comes in and says, listen, tell me what to do, I will do it, but don't tell me to think about the business problem. That's not my job description. Guess what happens? Isn't it? That is why it is ironic that in the Indian space, I find it very surprising when I talk to students, they say, what is your career progress? They say, I'll become a designer, then I'll become product manager. I'm like, well, what is this connection, right? Product manager is a different role, design is a different role. Isn't it? They're different specializations.
Mm.
Okay. But for them, what they think about product manager is, I'm a designer who is now managing the product. Okay. But then the product manager, if you ask them, say, no, I'll become a business guy. Okay. Well, no, right? You have to know everything. It's not that there's one guy manages the other person. Okay. But to be, nice, I would say this one thing. 3 years ago, the title of interaction designer did not exist. It exists today. 3 years ago, people will look at your portfolio and look at colors and layouts and they'll give you a job. Today, they don't. They ask you the reason why you're doing what you're doing. Okay. So a lot of this is happening through venture capitalists, people who've been working in the US or other places, mature markets. They're coming to India and they're telling founders, I will not invest in you until you get a good design team.
Mm.
These VCs are hiring people in the US to say, consult with my companies to help them hire good designers. I've never heard that happen before. Right? Imagine a VP of design somewhere sitting in the US or Europe or wherever who's designing your interview tasks and your interview questions in India. Right? Never happened before. So this maturity is only going to come. It's a matter of time. Okay, cool. So
Thank you.
there's another question, which is what's the difference between a UI and UX? And I'm going to get to that. I will talk about that. Go ahead, Rachna. You have a question. And then this is the last question, and then I'll keep moving. And then towards the end, I'll answer, take some more time. Go ahead, Rachna.
Sir, I am unable to understand what is metrics driven that being discussed. I'm not exactly getting
Okay.
into it.
Okay, let's think about a metric. Okay. A metric is when you run a business. Okay. You say you want customers, number of customers. Okay. Let us say you get 100 customers and 50 of them leave your website within 30 seconds. That is something called a bounce rate. Okay. So if you say you have 50% bounce rate, that's a metric. You say, I'm going to make a design change that will reduce the bounce rate from 50% to 25%. That's great because you're now impacting your business. Understand? Now, the same way, if you say somebody has put something in their shopping cart that they don't make a purchase, that's called abandonment rate. Okay. If you say I've got a 10% abandonment rate and a designer comes and says, I'm going to reduce that abandonment rate to 9%. I'm going to reduce it by 1%. Okay. Guess what? For a company of Amazon's side, a 1% reduction in abandonment rate talks about at least $500 million. Okay. So as a designer, you're looking at the numbers that the business looks at, and you're saying, how will my design impact that number? That is what a metric means. Okay. And like that, there are hundreds of metrics, and you have to design for that. Okay. Shubhangi, is it okay if I get to your question towards the end? Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, now here's another mind-blowing component for you, right? To get 1 million users, how long did it take for different companies? Netflix took 3.5 years to get to 1 million users. ChatGPT did that in 5 days. Right? So when you're talking design today, even if you go work for a startup, okay, every startup founder goes in assuming that all of a sudden my business may scale up, it may go viral. And so I need designers who are good on day one. You can't say, okay, I'm going to do half the work now, and when we launch, as my customers come, I'll become better. Right? So, I mean, that is also there. But again, the expectation of the standard is a lot higher. compared to even 3-4 years ago. Okay. And this is one of the things. And again, when you think about Pokemon Go, I just keep imagining that guy added 1 million users a day for the first 60 days. Okay. That is how viral that design was. Okay. So, Shahida, you're asking about portfolio. That is on day 3. That's what we will talk about on day 3. Okay. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. Now let's understand what's happening in terms of the experiences, because everything is user experience. We're talking customers. What is happening to our customers? Okay. Till 3 to 4 of, even 3 years ago, you had a lot of different devices. Okay. They were all working separately. You would have a computer, you'd have your TV, you would have your phone, your laptop, and stuff like that. Okay. But today, when you think about the next screen, okay, let's go on to the next screen. When you think about this, they're not separate. They're all connected to each other. Okay. The other aspect is, in the past, you used to say you can touch your screen, you can click somewhere, or you can press something. That's pretty much it. That is the way you interact with it, or you use your keyboard to type something in. But today, guess what happens? You can touch, you can click, you can press, you can talk, you can do a gesture, you can look at something. Okay. It still works. So the number of ways that you can get input from your user have doubled at least, isn't it? Not just that, each of these devices are also tracking what time of day is it. So maybe your bulb turns on at night and it turns off during the daytime. Maybe during the early nights, it is much brighter. And as it gets later in the night, it gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, right? So there's data that's coming from the internet and from sensors around the world. So your devices are not just reacting to you, they are reacting to the stimuli from around the world. Right? Now, a simple example, if you think about, is Google. When you think about connected devices, it's Google, where you do something on your mobile device, okay, and then you come to your desktop, you set a password, the same password continues to your desktop. Right? The same password continues to your tablet. Okay, you do some browsing in one computer, the same browsing history goes everywhere else. Right? Imagine that is what connected devices are, connected experiences. This is an experience. For you as a customer, it doesn't matter what device you're using. No matter what it is, as long as you're using Google, you have the exact same experience. Right? Same thing with Apple. No matter what device you use, it is the same experience you're getting throughout the game. Isn't it? So that is what you're talking about here. Today, it's about connected experiences. Okay. All devices talk to each other. Okay. And it's also about how do you communicate? The way that you communicate has become more natural and much more broader. Okay. And so when we think about this, there are so many more business plans and business ideas. So this is one of the things. What does AI do? The fundamental thing that they're saying is the age of big teams is gone, where you have one person who's managing 100, 200, 300 people. Those days are gone. What will happen is you'll have smaller teams, but you'll have more teams. So that is where the more employment comes, because the number of problems that a designer has to solve are so much more. Okay, so instead of having one company that is hiring 100 people, you might have 200 companies that are hiring maybe 2 people or 3 people. That's what the difference is. And what does that mean for you? Because earlier, students always used to say, or designers used to say, I want to work in a company where I'm being mentored, where I'm being taught and stuff like that. Right? But really, if you're in a 2-person team, do you think you're going to be taught anything? No, right? So companies are basically, that's why companies saying, I don't want to hire somebody that I'm going to teach because I don't have the bandwidth to teach. I can't teach them. So I'm just going to hire these guys and they have to deliver. If they're not delivering, they're out of the company. It's as simple as that. Okay, just because companies no longer had the bandwidth. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay. This is another data point that you want to see. The number of smart homes is expected to double from what it is today. Okay, and again, notice all my metrics, all my numbers that I'm sharing with you are not Indian numbers. I'm sharing global numbers because you are now going for a global job. Okay, you could be hiring for a job in San Francisco. You could say, I'm sitting in Hyderabad and doing a job in San Francisco. That's perfectly fine because companies are no longer worried about where am I hiring. So you are also not worried. So now you're no longer competing with your neighbor or your classmate. You're competing with somebody who's sitting somewhere else who went to some other university and you're competing. So you have to be better than that. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Here's another thing that changes in the work environment. Remember, I told you about smaller teams? Guess what? This is what the old way of doing was, which is the graphic design way, which is, you have a traditional designer who will do some publishing and all that, and they work with a product manager and a project manager, and it's a creative lead. Okay. And this clear-cut hierarchy. Who is the boss here? It's the project manager is the boss. Okay. After that is the creative lead, and after that is the designer. That's the hierarchy in this system. But think about today's system. This is what all of you are going to be working in if you're not already. Okay. You're working as a system. You are working as a specialist. You are good at what you do, and other people are good at what they do, and you're collaborating with all of these people. Okay. That means you do a design. Remember, I told you 1 pixel more or less. Well, that has implications for engineering. Okay. If you do 1 pixel more indent, guess what happens? The engineer has to write 2 more lines of code. Those 2 lines of code will have to be run by a processor. If the processor needs to run it and you have 1 billion customers, you need to spend a lot more money. So it has impact on business, right? So in a sense, you are working in an environment where everybody is specialists in what they're doing and you're executing. Okay. So you're working with product managers, you're working prototyping, engineering, data analysts, marketing, business leaders, all of these guys. You are good at what they do, what you do, they're good at what they do, and you execute. Okay. There's a fundamental difference in the way we expect to work as well. All right. Let's go to the next slide. So, which brings us to today's topic, which is why are we doing this workshop? Let's go to the next slide. Now, if you think about it, as you think about your career, this is literally what your career is. Each one of you probably see in different parts of this, right? How many of you say, I have a clear path to get what I want? And I guarantee you, maybe less than 1% of people will know what they want and how to do it. Okay. But for most of us, and this happened in my career too, right? There was no direction. I was just like going around hitting. And again, you go on ADP list, you talk to 10 mentors, everybody will give you different advice. Which advice are you supposed to take? Right? The point being is there are a lot of pitfalls as you plan your career. Right? And my intention as part of this workshop is to really stop you from thinking as a job. Don't think of it as a job. It's a career. Right? Because you truly enjoy when you're thinking about the long term. You don't enjoy when you're saying, okay, I have to do 10 pixels, but why am I doing those pixels? I don't know. Right? So my point is don't be a pixel monkey, right? Think about your career. Think about the impact that you can have. Think about the outcome. So just like I can say, like, this is what I say. If I can say I've created a feature that every internet user around the world uses, that's a career move, right? If I say that I am doing something that, where I'm creating widgets for something, that's not a career move. You're not happy in your job, or you will never be happy. Because if you spend 10 years, you look back and say, what did I do? Well, I created widgets. Good. Right? So the intention for this is, let's go to the next slide, is this. Plan your career. My intention for the next 3 days is to help you think about your career in a different perspective, right? As a UX designer. And how do you plan it? How do you strategize it? How do you grow? Okay. Everybody with me here? Just type in yes. Okay. Awesome. Now, here's an interesting data point. Guess who created the visuals? These two graphics. Go back to the previous one. AI. Done by AI. It took us 2 hours to do. where it would have taken us 4 days before. Now, the same question I'd ask you, if you had to do this, how long would it take you? So my expectation of my design team is so much higher because I mean, you have AI, right? So you should be able to do 10x what you're doing in 1/10 the time that you used to do before. That's what it is. That is the opportunity here. This is actually, Saurabh, which one was it? I think it was DALI, right?
Yeah, DALI and then Firefly.
Yeah. So that's what it is. So you have, different tools, but again, he did it in 2 hours where it would have taken him multiple days to do it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the roadmap that we're going to talk about is day one, and I'm going to talk about tomorrow, a couple of things about tomorrow, but I want to make sure we have covered everything for day one. Okay, so what you've done is you understand what UX is, you have a clear-cut understanding of the industry, you have a clear-cut understanding of the outlook for UX. Okay, just type in yes if you're there, and then I'll talk a little bit about day two, and I'll give you an introduction about day two. Awesome. So tomorrow, I'm going to talk about how you should learn and upskill. What topic should you learn? Right? And what are the standards that you need to have as you're learning those? Okay. And on day three, we're going to talk about how do you plan your career? How do you grow in your career? How do you get your promotions? How do you get your salary hikes? Which company should you work for? Those are all the things that we will talk about on day three. Because again, it's a very interesting thing is, I'll tell you why we should talk about which companies you should work for. Okay. Think about IPS, right? Indian Police Services. You could join either as a policeman at the bottom level, okay, or you could join as an inspector, or you could join as a IPS officer, okay. If you join at the bottom, it is probably near impossible that you'll ever be an IPS officer, okay. If you join as an inspector, might take you about 20 years to become a IPS officer, the junior most ranking IPS officer, right? If you join as an IPS officer, you probably can go up as high as you want, right? You're probably the Inspector General of Police at some point, right? So the point is where you start your career and how you plan your job jumps, where you go to, has a huge impact on what happens later. And it's better to plan it when you're younger than wait till you're 30 or 40 and you realize, oh, wow, I wasted 10 years of my life doing something else. And now that 10 years, I don't know where to go next. And your first job, second job, third job impacts the job after that. So you need to have a plan and a strategy for it. And that's why we talk about the growthful career there. Okay. Now, let's go back and talk about day two. Okay. So again, given we are all user experience people, guess what we did? We went and talked to a bunch of companies, including the companies that I run, right? And we said, okay, what are the core things I want a designer to do when they're working in my company? Okay. We asked that question and we came up with a list, which was hundreds of tasks long, but ultimately we were able to reduce it to this. Let's go to the next slide. We were able to identify 80 different tasks that a user experience guy is expected to do at their job. Okay. This is one part of the trick. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you a separate question. Okay. If these are the 80 different tasks, and these are non-automatable tasks, that means an AI is not going to replace you tomorrow. Okay. So this screen will come back again and again. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about, just focus on what I'm saying and stay with me in the moment. I think you'll probably get this a little bit better. Let's go to the next slide. How should you learn this? Okay. There's obviously the self-learning experience. Okay. Or you could say, I'm going to a boot camp. Or you could say, I'm going to go get a degree. 3 options. Okay. Now, what are the trade-offs between all 3 of these? Self-learning. Okay. You probably are going to be networking like crazy. You're going to be talking to people and doing a lot of that stuff. So, but it ultimately depends on your exploration, right? You found the right video, you found the right content, yay, awesome, good for you. You learned the concept. Okay. You found the wrong video, you found the thing, you're confused, you're going to spend 6 months trying to figure out what you're doing wrong, and then you come back, nobody will even tell you did wrong, right? Or you find 5 different mentors, everybody has a different opinion, you're still confused, you don't know which one is the correct way of doing it, right? The next part, the time, depends on how much time you're willing to spend. And the third part is cost, it's mostly free, right? Now let's look at the boot camp game. When you're looking at boot camps, the boot camps will have a curriculum. It's a fixed curriculum. And again, most boot camps will say, okay, here are these 80 topics. I'm trying to incorporate knowledge from all of these 80 topics. Okay. It's a fairly standard. You go to Ohio State boot camp versus you go to the local, Galiwala boot camp, sab ek hi syllabus copy karte hain. They all keep the same syllabus and they will teach you the same stuff. Okay. So it's basically the same set of topics. They would claim it's 3 to 6 months. Okay. And then it is like this, again, I say there's a huge variation between 10,000 to 2 lakhs. 10,000, I say 10,000 because I literally saw an auto in Hyderabad that had a sticker behind it that says UI UX training. Okay. So that is also possible. So you will see the 10,000 to 2 lakh range for boot camps. Okay. Now let's come and think about degrees. Okay. It's a dedicated learning experience. You're not doing anything else. You're focused. You're on campus or doing what you're thinking about it. You have classmates who are also in the same boat as you. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. It will take you anywhere between 1 to 2 years to do this. And the cost structure ranges between 4 to 20 lakhs, depending on which university you go to. Okay. So now, here's my question for you. Okay. My question is, think about you have those 80 tasks that you not need to learn to be able to execute when you're at work. And you have these 3 options here. What is the best way to learn? Right? That is my question for you guys. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So this is the homework that you would have. Okay, and again, think about it. Don't say degree, boot camp, whatever. I want you to think about it because there is an answer. There's a correct answer. There's a wrong answer. Okay. I really want you to think about it because there's a trick. And for those of you that know me, there's always a trick there. Okay. So this is your day 1 assignment. Okay. Reflect on where you are and what you want. Okay. And again, there's no harm saying, listen, I just want a job. I'm happy. Right? Where I have a stable job, I'm happy. There's no shame in that. Okay. The fact that you realize it early in your life makes your life easier and happier in the long term, right? If somebody says, I want to be the best in what I do and all that, everything has a trade-off, right? You want a stable job, you want chilled out, your career may not grow, but you'll be stable and you'll be chilled out, right? You want a very hard-hitting, you want to be the best and all that, your life will probably have a lot of twists and turns and interesting stuff and all that, but you'll reach there. But the point is, everything has a trade-off. So think about yourself, reflect on yourself and say, well, what is it? Where are you right now? And what do you want with your career? Not with your job, with your career. The second one is reflect on the alternatives. You have those 80 topics that you need to be good at. Which of these 3 options are best for you? Okay. You'll have a link that will be shared on WhatsApp. And for those of you that are not signed up on Trainer Central, do sign up on Trainer Central because that's where all these assignments are. Okay. So then you'll be able to get this done. And there's a link in the chat. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Got it. So I'm done right now with 1 minute to spare. That's awesome. So I'm going to take about 15 minutes with your permission to answer any open questions that you would have to make sure that we are covered all the questions you would have for today. Okay. So just feel free to raise your hand. You have a feature down there that says reactions. Under reactions, you can say raise your hand and then you would be able to ask your questions. All right, Jashwant, can we allow him to unmute? Go ahead, Jashwant.
Hello.
Yeah, so you need to speak up a little bit.
Clear question. Does really Indian users are ready for more?
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you properly. Can you maybe type in your question? I'll answer it. Okay. Are Indian users really ready for modern design? Well, good question. My argument is absolutely. You use Apple, you use Microsoft, you use Google, right? So Indian users are used to it. They have that expectation, right? They tolerate bad design. When you say modern design, I'm assuming good design, right? They tolerate bad design because you have no option. If you go to IRCTC or some government website, you tolerate it because you have no other option. But at the same time, you know what good experiences are. You are used to it, and that's what you want. Okay? So, go ahead, Shubhangi.
Hello, sir. I just want to ask you, what is the basic difference between UI UX designer and a web designer? Because both develops website.
No. Understood. There's a difference, right? Website may be, what is a website? Think about it. Okay? Website could be something as my company website. This is who I am. It's informational in nature. Okay? Versus think about transactional websites where like Amazon, where you're constantly giving it information, taking in, or Google. Google is probably the most complex piece of software, Google search, because it's just one page, but it's got infinite variations. You know? So a designer is thinking about that interaction, the variations and all of that. Okay, you're not designing a website. Okay. Now, what is the difference between a web designer and a UI UX designer? See, web designer, I really don't know what that term means. Okay, I'm thinking it is some kind of an engineering guy who's doing coding. Okay, so that is coding is different. And again, I want you to understand the difference between coding and design. Okay, it's the same as architecture and civil engineering. One guy does the planning, one guy does the execution. Okay, so design is the process of planning. Okay, coding is the process of execution. Okay, both are two sides of the same coin, but they're very, very different. Because in design, you are incentivized to think broad and kind of come up with a solution, identify all possible problems and solve all those problems and give a solution. Okay. Whereas in coding, once the solution is given, you're expected to do the most optimal solution ever. Okay. The simplest, simpler ways when I say engineers, right? I want my engineers to be lazy. Okay. A lazy engineer writes good code because they can write it very, very optimally. Okay. But I want my designers to be hardworking because a designer has to think about all possible outcomes when they're designing it. Because if a designer was lazy, they will forget like, okay, yeah, what happens in an error state? I don't know. Now your project fails and 50% of your customers are angry with you. Okay. So that is what it is. Now, when it comes to UI and UX, okay, UI is you're probably, again, in my mind, UI is not a career. Okay. That is the part that is automated. Okay. UI is you're talking about individual components, Dropbox, text box, colors, layouts, all that stuff. But UX is thinking about the experience. What is the person's experience going to be when they're using your product? Okay. That experience cannot be automated. UI will be automated. It has already been automated in some ways. You understand? Should you do a or a text box? That is a simple question that should be done, right? And so when somebody says UI UX, right, and I use UI UX because of simply marketing reasons, because otherwise people will not even see it. But I generally say, if you're saying you are UI UX, it's the same thing as saying doctor compounder, right? The UI guy is the compounder, the doctor is there. So if you're saying I'm a doctor compounder, it sounds funny, doesn't it? Because the doctor can do the compounder's job, but it is funny when you hear it. The same way, if somebody says I'm a UI UX designer, I'm like, which one are you? Are you a doctor or a compounder? You get it? So if you want to build a long-term career in UX, you are a UX designer. You're thinking strategy. You're thinking, problems that you're trying to solve, not just widgets. Does that answer your question, Shubhangi? Cool. Awesome. Go ahead, Achyut.
So I just had this question. Would you have any recommendation that the other day in our study group, as part of our study group at college, right? We were
Huh.
kind of studying something called as generative UI, where they are thinking that, going ahead, interfaces will be generative for a very specific scenario and a specific user. That means
Huh.
one app having many interfaces as per the user.
Correct.
So
Correct.
what we as a generation of designers, right, currently in contrast with your generation, so we are learning so much stuff from which has been like very foundational, and at the
Uh-huh.
same time so many things are changing right now because of AI revolution.
Mhm.
So where do you see us as a generation? Are we at an advantageous place, or are we at a middle point where we don't know to be there, or just wanted.
See, let me put you this way, right? I have a kid who's about 5 years old, going to be 6. She will claim she's 5 3/4. Okay. So for me, right, I keep training her in design in different ways,
Mhm.
right? I put her in front of Dali. She wants to color. Okay. So I say, okay, sit in front of Dali and tell Dali what you want. Okay.
Mm.
You'll get different coloring books and then you can color it. Right.
Right.
So what I'm teaching her to do is think about what she wants, break it down in a way that can be explained, okay, and have an opinion when you're interacting with the other system, okay. So in many ways, what it is for us, we had to do it all manually, okay. Today, in fact, if you go to an AI, you say like, this is the problem I have. Who are my users? It'll tell you. It'll give you a list of 5 people. Then you have to read it and understand, well, of these 5 users, which are the 2 users I should focus on? Well, what are the problems that they have? It will tell you. Then you refine it, right? So
Yeah.
there is an opportunity there. So while the amount of knowledge that you guys have to play with
Mm.
is probably, double what we had when we were growing,
Mm.
when I was getting into the discipline, okay? But the amount of support you have is way more than we ever had. Okay. The amount of knowledge, like even design patterns, like, that have already been explored, have already been done. We were exploring all those design patterns from the ground up, like how should a date widget look like? How should that widget? We were designing everything from the ground up. For
Yeah.
you guys, you don't have that. They're already designed. There's a lot of thought process. There's already, material design, all those stuffs are there. What you need to do from your perspective, right, is you need to know what is available. If you don't know what is available, you'll never be able to use it, right? You need to don't reinvent the wheel. Know what knowledge is out there. Know how all this knowledge fits with each other.
Mm.
Okay. And know how these things, when fit together, can solve a problem. Okay. You are solving problems. We were the real UI guys, right? We were creating the widgets. Then we were thinking widget goes, how do you put it together to create an experience? We were doing all that. You don't have to worry about it. The beauty of it is you can directly jump into UX.
Correct.
Okay. And I would say that this is the future. UX doesn't matter, right? Even 20 years down the line, if everything is automated, you say one word and the software will create the tool for you. You still need somebody who identifies the problem. You still need somebody who thinks about the human experience,
Right.
isn't it? So does that answer your question, Achut?
Absolutely, sir. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Muzakar.
Hello, sir. So my question
Yes.
is a little different from this workshop. Recently, you
Mhm.
happened to announce the master's program in UX.
Uh-huh.
So I would like to know a little update on that.
Can we wait for because I mean, master's program again for me is this is the master's program that we're doing with OP Jindal University, which is an institute of eminence, which it's like one of the top 10 universities in India, and this is going to the first AI-enabled master's program. Okay, and again, I'm not selling the master's program. There's a lot of process. There's a lot more work to do. It's not going to happen in the next couple of weeks, but we are hoping that we will launch it on July 1st. But again, there's a lot of work and planning that we are currently working on to do that.
Okay,
Does that
thank
answer
you.
your question, Muzakir?
Yes, yes. Thank you, sir.
Cool. Yeah, go ahead, Vanshika.
Hello, sir. Thank you
Hey.
so much for the today's session. It was really helpful.
Nice. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
glad.
So, sir, I want to ask, like, despite being self-taught and having 2 years of experience in the industry, I still think I lack somewhere, and having a mentor to guide me is what I need. So, is this really needed?
Absolutely.
So,
Right. In my own career, and this is something that I have realized from my own life, right? Even though I was a cognitive science guy, and this is what I say, I did a master's program. In those days, there was no such thing as UX design. There was a human factors engineering. Because in those days, you would design aircrafts and aircraft cockpits and nuclear reactors and stuff like that, where you make a mistake, people will die, right?
Yeah.
So those are the areas where they said, no, you need a human factors person to do that. Okay. So that is what I got trained in.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the problem that I had was the university gave me so much knowledge, but it didn't tell me how to be capable on day one of my job. It didn't tell me that. So when I would join a job, I would have to look for mentors. They would tell me, no, think about this. In fact, I didn't even know that I could put UX designer, search for the title UX designer as a job for me. Right? Until a mentor sat me down and said, no, you can do UX design. So search for a title UX design. And when I went there, of course, I could do this job because this is what I learned in school. But nobody, unless somebody taught me that, it didn't happen. Right? So ideally, these mentors got different flavors. Okay. And you have to be very, very careful. If you get the wrong mentor, you'll go in the wrong direction. Okay. So and again, which mentor, which question you should ask, that's also important. Okay.
Yeah.
You ask a mentor who spent 20, 30 years, who've kind of gone around, been there. So you don't want to ask them questions about UX or UI. Right?
Yeah.
You want to ask them questions about strategy. Because for me, if you talk to a guy like me, it's been like years since I done my last design, right? It's been at least I can supervise other people, but it's been years since I've done it. Right? So you ask me, should I do this or should I do that widget? I will say, yeah, but is it the best use of my time? Probably not. Whereas you talk to someone who's got 4 or 5 years of experience, okay? Then you talk to them, you ask them to critique, right? So the same, and I'll tell you, this is an interesting thing. Were you able to get this question right? Which of those two guys is a designer? A or B? Were you able to get it right?
Sorry, can you repeat? Actually,
Were you able to answer that
network issue.
question? Which of those two designers which of those two designs is a UX guy?
Yeah, I was right. I
You
can
were right.
clearly see the design, like it was very clear.
Yes, so you want to find those kinds of mentors, people who understand, because the problem today is out of 100 people, 90 people don't understand it. Right? So you want to spend some time understanding who these guys are, even whether it's a senior person also, doesn't matter, right? There's senior people also, you need to sit down with them and talk to them. Do you understand? What is your philosophy? What have you done? How do you approach design? You want to ask those questions. It has to be some way of a, learning slash,
Yeah,
so
start a
talk to 20
conversation.
people, understand, and also chemistry, right? Your chemistry, your style of learning and the mentor's style of teaching should be same, right? So when I teach, I find it interesting because there'll be at least 25% of the people that will be super frustrated with me. Okay. The reason is I never give them the answer. I force them to think. Okay. So for people who want direct answers, they'll say, Prasad, dimag kha leta hai, right? So you want to connect with mentors who will be like you. So you will enjoy that relationship.
True.
So that is what I would advise. Find mentors definitely, but make sure you talk to a lot of people, interview them, find the right people who can kind of guide you, and then go with them. Okay. Mentors there is no exchange. Whether you get a degree or whatever, mentors are invaluable. Okay. And keep in mind also, ADP list, the first 50, 100 mentors that were there were super quality. Okay. Today, all the mentors that sign up, they sign up because they want it as a thing on their LinkedIn profile.
True.
So you have to be very, very careful and very aware of who you're talking to. Okay, cool. Awesome. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jashwant.
So hello, sir. So as you told, because of Corona, so most of the companies are hiring Indian designers also. So my question was, is there any fundamental changes that needs to be considered while working for American companies or UK or something? For example, if we see Arabian countries like the people, Dubai or Qatar or any other countries, they read from right to left. So we read from left to right. So, like that example, is there any specific fundamental UX changes that we need to consider while working for American or UK countries or European countries? You can say.
So, yeah, absolutely. Localization is a concept that you have to learn as part of design. If you're designing global interfaces, you have to know localization,
Hmm.
right? So I know this because I was managing global research teams for Yahoo, right?
Hmm.
I had teams in Asia Pacific, I had teams in Latin America, I had teams in Oceania, Europe, all those places. And you realize the same design will have subtle changes around the world. Okay. And those changes are not big. For somebody that's not trained, they will say it's the same. But for people who are trained, they realize it has a huge impact. Okay. But again, by and large, what is also interesting is most of the interfaces that you see around the world, right, are American interfaces.
Huh.
Okay, I'll give you a simple example. Because US was the pioneer in the internet, they were the first websites. So most customers got used to those styles of design. Okay. So if, for example, in the US or Western countries, red color is supposed to be extremely dangerous, right? Stop. You know? In China, red color is supposed to be auspicious. Okay. It is auspicious in everything. So now if you say, put the red color for China and say stop, will that guy understand? No, it's good luck. Let's do it. No, not really. Because these are web interfaces, Chinese users have learned that red color is bad. Okay.
Yeah,
So in a lot of cases, the design standards have been fairly globalized because they've been run from one culture from the beginning. Okay. Whether it's a right aligned or left aligned or all that stuff, those are other changes that are very, very cultural. But for most part, there are standards that are being followed. Okay. So, but if you want to specialize, that is a specialization, that's a special role. But again, think about it as if you have 10 designers, there might be one guy that has a specialization in localization.
Need to
Because
speak the local
everybody
people.
will be able to get it 95%, you'll be able to get it right. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, got it, got it. And one more
Then
question.
there's also special other interesting reasons. So around the world, there are laws. Okay. The European Union has laws for design.
Huh.
US has laws for design, right? They call accessibility laws. Okay. So if you go into the US and stuff like that, by law, you have to design your screens to work with somebody who is blind, to work with somebody who is colorblind or whatever disabilities, right? So these are laws. So as a designer, you have to know those laws. Okay. So I think it's called 503 accessibility guidelines and stuff like that. So these are, again, but India does not have design laws yet, but they're going to be legislated soon, right? And that is what I find interesting. Engineering doesn't have laws. Design has laws. Think about it, right? Governments are legislating. That is how important design is as a discipline. Okay. So from your perspective, yes, there are a lot of other things that, not just localization, but accessibility and all that. Even security, you have to think about security guidelines now because there are laws that have been going to come in for security and all that. So you have to start thinking about that. But for now, it is not a priority. If you're building your career, you need to know 95% before you get to that 5%. Does that answer your question, Yashwant?
Yes, sir,
Awesome.
yes, sir.
Cool.
And
Go
one of the
ahead.
small question.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, please. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. There's a lot of people that are asking questions, and I know we are running a little bit late, but I want to answer as many questions as I can. So I'll give another, like we're running over, but I'll give another 10 minutes and then we can call it a day. Is that fair?
Sure, sure.
Cool. Go
Thank
ahead, Swaroop.
Good evening, sir. Actually,
Yeah.
I am a BTech third year student. Present, I am pursuing artificial intelligence in JN2 based college. But my doubt is how I can become a UX developer as a beginner. I don't even know the scratch how to start it.
See, simplest thing. I've put pretty much a lot of the content that I have is available for free. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Medium में पूरे articles लिखे हुए हैं मैंने, I put complete articles. All you have to do is go and read there. And what I've done, these 80 topics that are there, I've broken it down into concepts, and हर concept के लिए material है उधर.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So there's free content that I've put up there. And then we have the YouTube channel, जहाँ a lot of times every week we sit and discuss. We are part of this community. We discuss and we talk about, we do exercises and we learn. Right?
Okay, sir.
Now, another thing is we have something called a practice group. So we have videos where you can watch it, and then you'll have mentors that are telling you whether right or wrong. Because see, everybody can see a video, right? But it's actually when you're doing the work that you want to get feedback. So that is where we have mentors within the ecosystem who come and give you feedback. You did this right, you did this wrong, and all that. So jitna zyada aap practice karoge, practice is the core thing, right? The more you practice, the better you get at it.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So, but again,
Okay,
there's a lot of content that's available. In fact, if somebody from my team can paste the links to the Medium articles and all that, you guys can read it. It's all there. Okay. But the only thing is, understand, my style of teaching is very different. And I'm not saying I'm the only one that is correct or whatever, right? There's different styles of teaching, different ways. So, मेरा style ये है कि market में क्या चाहिए, and reverse engineer it, and then teach accordingly. Okay.
sir.
Versus
Sir,
other people's style is, here are these 100 things, learn everything. Okay.
Sir,
So it's a different style. Yeah, go ahead.
sir, why are you providing this course? I want to know that, sir. You are a very big guy. You have a lot of experience. Why are not giving payment? Like, why are you providing this free to us?
See, for me, the master's program is where the money is going to be made for me, right? Because my goal,
Okay,
again, is
sir.
a simple goal that I have is, I want people to be competent, right? So even in masters, for me, the way the master's program is run is, there are companies that are already signed up that say कि इसमें से आपको जो talent मिलेगा, I will take it. So the companies fund me, right? So for me, but even to get in the masters, you need some basic knowledge, you need motivation, you need all of that stuff, right? So that is
Yes,
where
sir.
we're saying all the other stuff is there. It's available for you. You can read it, you can engage with it.
Okay, sir.
Right? What is valuable is my time. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir. That's
And
the
as
correct.
long as I'm not giving you like 4 hours or 10 hours of my time, I can still make it available to you. It doesn't have to cost a lot, isn't
Thank
it?
you, sir. Yes, sir.
So that is the
Yes,
perspective that I have. And again, another aspect, I get frustrated because lots of people give fake knowledge. And that is
yes,
what
sir.
pisses me off. And so
Thank you.
that's why I put all this for free so people can access it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so
All
much.
right, awesome. Cool. Go ahead, Vanshika.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So I have a very basic question, and the question is, why did you choose UX design? What motivated you or fascinated you towards UX design?
Interesting question. So when I was in India, this was long ago, in un dinon mein COBOL used to be the language of choice. Okay. I was very interested in psychology. Okay. And so when I did a program in COBOL to analyze somebody's handwriting and tell their personality traits. So at that time, it was just intellectual curiosity. I used to keep tinkering with stuff. So when I went to the US for a master's program, I went for a master's in computer science because that was all I knew. And so then my first boss at that time, this is what I say, mentors. Mentors make a huge impact in your life. The first boss that I had, she looked at my resume and said, "You are not a computer science guy." I'm like, "What do you mean I'm not a computer science guy?" Like, "You're a human factors guy." I'm like, "What is human factors?" I didn't even know it. They said, "Human factors, go check it out. We have a department for human factors." Right? And the university I went to was right next to this Air Force base. So they were doing a lot of military research. And I come from a military background, so I loved, all that research. So I figured I need to get into one of those research labs that do military work, right? And in those days, I was working with the Predator drones and all that, designing those unmanned vehicles. Okay, so it was really cool. And so I started enjoying it. I started realizing coding is not what it is. I like the planning, the strategy components, and all that stuff. And so I fell in love with it that way. Okay. Then after a while, what was interesting was I interviewed, and this was when I interviewed with Google for the first time. Okay. And because I did my master's thesis was the search assistant was my master's thesis. Okay. So and then I was interviewing with Google, and that time they were a small company. And their head of design sat me down and she said, okay, nobody comes to search for the joy of searching, right? So how can you make search a joyful experience? ये तो अच्छा question है यार. How can you make it a joyful experience? Because if you make people spend more time on search, they get frustrated with you, right? So I said, how can you make it joyful? So then that kind of get going. And years later, I realized like when I launched Search Assistant, this was a very interesting story. You test it in a lab, okay? So we did the Search Assistant, we're testing in the lab, and this lady comes in and she's using it, and I'm in the other room observing her. And she starts crying. If your customer is crying, then you know something is wrong. Lawsuit hone wala hai. So I run to the other side. What happened? She said, I just came back from the doctor and they told me I had diabetes. Okay. And when I searched here, I found that when you search diabetes treatments, alternative treatments, diabetes support groups, and all that, all these suggestions came. The moment I saw that, I realized I was not alone. You know, and so I felt this sense of peace, and that's why I was crying. Imagine that power of that moment, right? That is when I was fully sold on design. You know, that is the impact. Design can make people change how they feel about themselves. It can make people change how they relate to the world around them, right? It can make you billions of dollars or lose you billions of dollars. What other discipline is there that has that much power and impact? You know? And so that is why I am super excited. And interestingly enough, my brother is a designer. My younger brother, usne mere ko dekha, wo designer bana, right? All my nieces and nephews are designers. They've all become designers, right? Let's see. In my extended family, everybody is designers. So this is what it is. Like design, like, you know, we love it. We basically evangelize it. Everybody is a designer in our family. Right? Including to the point that my mom sits down and she critiques websites today. So that's what it is. Does that answer your question, Vanshika?
Yes, sir. So, well, I'm a graphic designer myself, and I also wanted to know if my graphic design career would help me in this UX design thing.
So it will definitely give you a leg up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. However, you need to broaden your scope of responsibility.
Absolutely.
You know? So the people that do really well in design are people who come from psychology, graphic design. Architects do amazing. Okay. I'll tell you why. Architects को 5 साल रुलाते हैं to focus on the details and think about everything, right? By the time they come out, they're trained to be UX designers. They naturally have that, right? So engineers, because engineering, ultimately, remember that circle that I said, you have to work with all these guys. Engineers do really well because they can do amazing interaction design,
Right.
because they understand the connection. Mechanical engineers, ironically, because they understand the connection between different components. Right? So again, you know, they will give you opportunities, but the thing is you have to work hard to spread your scope and start getting into it. Okay, cool.
Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Yeah, you're welcome. Go ahead, Pranesh.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir.
Go ahead.
While you were talking about AI,
Huh.
You did convince me that AI is not gonna like replace our jobs. But then
I did or I
isn't
did not?
AI gonna affect? You did convince us.
Okay.
It's not gonna replace our jobs, but then is it gonna affect the pay we are gonna have? Like, since it's making our
Absolutely.
job easier.
No. You're mistaken, right? That's why I showed the second chart. The chart is the salaries went up. Okay.
Mhm.
Because now what you could do in 2 days, that's why I showed the graphic also, right? Remember the career ka graphic? That would have taken 2 days, took
Yeah.
us 2 hours, right? So my expectation of your productivity is increased, isn't it? So if you could do 10 things in a day, now you can do 20 things, correct? So if you are capable of managing the AI, then you can do more work. Obviously, you need more salary. You get it? So it is your
Yeah.
productivity that you bring to the table, and you're harder to find, because if you can manage an AI out of 100 people, if I can find one guy who can manage an AI, that's good. It is harder to find people who can manage AIs. There are a lot of people that will just use AI, use all the prompts and all that. You ask them 5 questions, they can't answer what they did. You understand? So knowing how to use the AI correctly, that is the game. Does that answer your question, Pranesh?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome. So you still have a question mark, but I don't know where the question mark is. At least on your face, you have a question mark. Go ahead, admin.
Hello, sir. My name is Pinal. I am a student of UI UX designing, and I'm learning it from Arena Animations.
Okay.
The course duration is 18 months. So, is it comes under in a degree or a boot camp?
Because of the duration, I would say, again, this, even degree colleges, right? So 4 lakhs to 20 lakhs का range है, क्यों difference है वो भी समझना चाहिए, है ना? So the thing is, if it is a degree is generally accredited by the government, you know, because the government regulates that degree. So if you get that degree piece of paper in your hand, then it's a degree.
Okay. One more question, sir.
Mhm. Yes.
After completing my course, when I go to for interview for getting a job, which things are important for UI UX designer while they are giving a interview for freshers?
So we'll talk about it on day 3. पूरा एक दिन उसके लिए मैंने devote करके रखा है, right?
Okay.
So, but make sure you complete all your assignments and everything to get invited to day 3.
Okay, sir. The today's assignment you have given us, so we have to submit on that link which you
Correct.
send it in chat box.
Correct.
Okay, sir. Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
कोई doubt है? You're on WhatsApp. Send a message on WhatsApp. Somebody will help you.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. And one thing I will say is, jitna bhi content hai and all that, I will share it with all of you guys. Whatever, so you know where to start off and how to read and how to engage. Okay. Go ahead, Harita. You're the last person, and then we can end the day today. Yeah.
Sir, good evening, sir. I come from finance background. So how do I break into this industry, sir?
Finance is a little bit tough. It's a little bit tough because
understand
there
that.
is no direct correlation.
Hmm.
However, in finance, you have lots of metrics.
Yes.
Everything is, acronyms in finance,
Yes, sir.
whether a company is running well or not. So you understand metrics a lot, right? So one way that you could potentially, and again, it's again looking at your skills. It's not going to be as quick a transition as a graphic designer, right?
Yes.
Or even an architect will find difficulties. Even though architects make amazing designers, they will still find difficulty because they have to understand the discipline. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So what you need to do is you need to understand the fundamentals, right? Which we will talk about tomorrow. What are the topics you should learn? We will talk about that. You need to get your fundamentals. Okay. Then you need to start building up your profile, portfolio, and your body of work. Okay. And then you break into it. Okay. It's not impossible, but at the same time, it is not as easy as a graphic designer simply transitioning.
So for me, it is just like I was planning to do self-study, but would you just need to go for boot camp or should I go for a degree? I'm not sure right now. So
Yeah, so think about that's your homework, right? Socho,
Okay.
tomorrow we'll get the answer.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Harita. Awesome, guys. Thank you very much for spending your time. I know there are many places that you can be at, and I'm glad you found the value of being here. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And again, my advice is keep your cameras on, because if you don't keep your cameras on, you should just watch it on YouTube. Okay? So with that, have a great day and see you tomorrow. Bye.